In this Battletech Tactica vlog, we're going to look and explore the idea, how do we exploit a bad turn of events? Now, I'm not talking for you, I'm talking to put yourself in a position. Put yourself in a position so that when something bad happens to your opponent, that momentum, that turning of the tide, you can take advantage of it. Think about a game. We've got two lances going head to head. We're firing missiles and lasers. We're using cover. We're getting into position. And then Battletech, stuff happens. Armor goes to internal, a crit, something explodes. You take a headshot and a mech is down, or there's physical attacks and you slip and the machine falls. Something happens where now your opponent has a plan that they're trying to enact, right? Mech Command has a plan they're trying to enact with the lances. But then when something unfortunate happens in Battletech, and it could even be just a mech finally explodes and goes down, that puts opposing Mech Command, that puts their plans on hold for a moment, and they need to address that situation. So we want to be in a position to exploit it. One of the things that I like to have as we move into mid to higher battle value games, I'm not saying you can't have this in low battle value games, but low battle value games, 2 to 3K, you're at that position, at that ranking where you really don't have anything much to spare. But once we get into the mid to higher battle value, you could take a little bit. I like to use hovercraft. Now, it's interesting with Battletech being a literal product of the 80s. The only two games where I really saw this was Ogre, right? The classical game where you're taking on futuristic cybernetic warfare, AI-controlled tanks. And Battletech, hovers were an important part of the game. I guess because in the 80s, that was like the new military trend and everyone was going to be, tanks are out, right? Just utilizing hover vehicles. So it's interesting to see the imaging of those two games. But in Battletech, hovers, now there are, of course, like mechs, light hover vehicles, medium and heavy, and I've covered some of the more popular hover vehicles that I like to utilize, push those up to the Battletech playlist on the channel here. But low battle value hovercraft that are fast moving, that medium laser and or short range missiles. Medium laser for damage versus heat versus weight, short range missiles, because if there's an exploit, like I've gone to internal or something's happened, or we blasted you and now you've got a gyro or engine hit and I just got to get another crit, having that spread is important. Having a group of these, 1 is none, 2 is 1, 3 is some. Having at least 3, and again, low battle value, just kind of hanging out. If I've got my lance moving ahead, these hover vehicles hang back 6, 7 hexes, far enough away that your opponent is not going to really shoot at them with enough overlapping fire. They might take a shot with a long-range AC-2 or an LRM pack. But if I push my lances up, there are more targets in Mech Command's face. There's more targets in your face that you need to deal with versus the hovers. Likewise, I don't want to force you to deal with these hovercraft by zipping them forward. They'll kind of hang back. Now, we need to be careful because we talked about this. Battle value needs to be out there earning. This is one of the challenges of an assault mech, as powerful as they are. If I take an Atlas, the battle value of that, and I park that Atlas defending my base, yeah, that's serious. You're going to have to break through that and deal with that. But for 3, 4, 5, 6 turns until you get there, the Atlas really isn't doing anything. Assault mechs need to be assaulting. They need to be pushing that battle value forward. So if I take these 3 hovercraft and I park them and I sit them, or they just, actually if they're behind the lance, I'm constantly moving them. I'm zooming them up and down, left and right, because I want to get those movement modifiers stacking up. And they have enough speed that they can zip to one side, expend a few to turn, and then zip back on the other side. I want to protect them. But it's low enough battle value that it can afford to sit there and wait for the opportunity to exploit. So then when a mech goes to internals and you're starting to maybe pull it back to take it out of range, or if another mech takes a headshot, and even if it doesn't knock the headshot off and you fail that consciousness check, I can zip to rear armor and now blasting you there. If something happens where we go to internals and ammo's exploding, possibly exploding, I'm zipping those up there and I'm going to try and ping you. So we want to have something in reserve. Tactically, things change. It's fluid. You can use these hovers in a different way. You can zip them up the flank. You can run them as skirmishers. It's not like this is the only thing they can be used for. But back to that overall tactica, Battletech is fluid, back and forth. We're dealing damage. We're taking damage. 2 lances engaging. And something happens to your opponent. A mech goes down. A crazy thing happens. And you're like, what do I do now? I leave you with this. Anytime you roll dice, good things can happen. Bad things can happen. So if it's your turn, I kind of want you to roll dice for the bad things to happen. If it's my turn, I try to roll the least amount of dice. I had an Atlas. I very rarely kick for just this reason. Although, kicking with an Atlas will just, if it hits, will split most other machines in half. I got up there. I think it was like a medium I was trying to kick or something. I was going to just split this machine in half. Missed, failed, fell. Next turn, try to get up, fail. Next turn, try to get up, fail. Next turn, try to get up, fail. That's only happened maybe once in the entire time I played Battletech, but it has so traumatized me that I really don't want to kick, especially if it's an assault class machine. Imagine that happens. Something crazy happens. Your opponent fails a pilot check. They fall through a building. Just who the heck knows? It's Battletech. It's the game of armored combat. What do you have? And I'm suggesting hovers as a starting point, but what do you have to take advantage, to exploit that positioning in that moment?